What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Oak Tree Football Channel, and today I'm going to be continuing my NFL predictions. For the past few days, I've been going through each division in the NFL and making my predictions. I recently finished all the NFC divisions. Today I'm going to be starting the AFC divisions, and I'm going to be doing what, in my opinion, is one of the best divisions in football, and I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say this, the AFC West. The AFC West, of course, had last year's Super Bowl winners, Kansas City Chiefs, and it has a lot of other teams that really could do some damage in the AFC and in just football as a whole this year. So it's a very good division, and without further ado, let's get into it. At number 4, coming in with a record of 7-9, so not even a bad record, I have the LA Chargers. In my opinion, the Chargers are a pretty good team. I think their defense is really good. I think they have some really talented offensive players, but the quarterback is just the issue. They're probably going to start Tyrod Taylor, and I don't think Tyrod Taylor is a bad quarterback. He led the Bills to the playoffs a few years ago. He just isn't as good as the rest of the quarterbacks in this division, and there are a lot of better quarterbacks in the NFL. I still think they'll finish 7-9, which with the 7th playoff team could get them into a playoff spot, especially with a pretty weak AFC this year. It's not terrible, but that 7th spot, in my opinion, is wide open, really. So they could maybe sneak in with a 7-9 record. I have finishing 7-9. At quarterback, they have Tyrod Taylor, like I said, and they drafted Justin Herbert in the first round. I don't think Herbert will start, but maybe he'll get some playing time, but I think Tyrod Taylor is the starter for this team. At running back, they have Austin Eckler. I think Austin Eckler is a good running back, but I'm not sure about him as a starting running back. I mean, he's been a backup running back, and he's been good at that for the past few years, but now he's going to be the starter. I think he's going to struggle a lot, and I think the running game is not going to be great for the Chargers this year. Looking at the wide receivers, they have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Both those guys are really talented, in my opinion. I really like Mike Williams. He has good hands. And Keenan Allen's a fantastic player as well. He could be a Pro Bowler this year. 2 fantastic receivers right there. But the backups aren't as good. They have Darius Jennings. They drafted KJ Hill, which is a pretty good draft pick out of Ohio State. So it's an okay receiving group. The top 2 are great, but the rest not as good. Tight end, they have Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry is a really good tight end when he's healthy. He's had a lot of injuries in his career, only drafted in 2016, but when he is on the field, he is a pretty good player. And then offensive line is pretty good. They have Brian Bulga, Trey Turner, Mike Pouncey, who's a very good center, Dan Feeney. Those guys are all really good, and then they have Sam Tivai as their left tackle. So it's a pretty strong offensive line. That's probably going to help them out a lot this year, especially with not the best quarterback going into the season. On the defense, their defense is really the strong point of this team, and if they do make the playoffs, I think it's going to be mostly because of the defense. Looking on the defensive line, they have Justin Jones and Linval Joseph as defensive tackles. Justin Jones isn't that good, but Linval Joseph is a very, very good player. At the defensive ends, they have Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. Both of those guys are fantastic players. Both of those guys could get double-digit sacks. They're fantastic. And, yeah, just great players. Looking at the linebackers, they have Nick Vigil, who they recently signed, Oshina Nwosu, and Kenneth Murray, the rookie they drafted in the first round of this year's draft. So it's not the strongest linebacking group, but it's definitely not a weak one. And then at cornerbacks, they signed Chris Harris Jr., which was a fantastic signing. And they have Casey Hayward as well. And they have Desmond King. That is a fantastic cornerback group. Some of those guys are getting older, that is true, but I still think that's a really, really good cornerback group right there. And then safeties, they have Rashawn Jenkins, and Derwin James, but I do believe Derwin James was injured and will be out most of the season, but they also have Nazir Adderley who can potentially play that position, and Desmond King can play safety as well. So they do have some players who can fill in for Derwin James when he's injured. So this is a pretty good team. I think 7-9 makes sense for them just because I don't think their offense is strong enough. They could definitely be better than that. With a better quarterback, I think this would be a playoff team. I think they'll be good 7-9, but that still ends up being bottom of the AFC West. Next up, coming in at number 3, I have the now Las Vegas Raiders, formerly the Oakland Raiders, with a record of 9-7. The Raiders were really close to making the playoffs last year. They just didn't finish the season very well, and a lot of people are forgetting that, and I still think they have a strong team. I don't think their draft was great, but I still think they have a pretty equally strong team, and I think Potentially they'll even be able to sneak into the playoffs. I don't think the AFC is the best conference overall, and that 7th spot is really wide open, and I would not be surprised to see the Raiders get in there, especially if they finish 9-7. At quarterback, they have Derek Carr, but they signed Marcus Mariota, which was an interesting signing. Both of those guys can be solid quarterbacks. Obviously, Marcus Mariota got benched last year. He wasn't great. But Derek Carr is an extremely underrated quarterback. He definitely will be the starter. He's very underrated, and he can have a good season. There's no doubt about that. Running back, they have second-year Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was fantastic as a rookie, and he absolutely should have deserved to win Rookie of the Year award. I like Kyler Murray as a player more than I like Josh Jacobs, but Josh Jacobs was the better player overall. I think Kyler Murray only won because he was a quarterback and he was the first overall pick. I still think Murray was good, but Jacobs was better. Wide receiving group, this is not as good. It's still okay. They drafted Henry Ruggs Jr. in the first round. Definitely, he's very, very fast, but I feel like they kind of reached there. They could have taken any receiver, and they took Henry Ruggs. I definitely don't think Ruggs is a bad player, but I feel there were better players to pick with that pick. They also drafted Bryan Edwards in the 3rd round, and last year they had drafted Hunter Renfrow, who was fantastic as a rookie. And then they have Zay Jones, Marcel Aitman, and Nelson Aguilar, who I know a lot about as an Eagles fan. So it is a pretty good overall receiving group, but they don't really have a true leader in that group. A lot of teams really have a number one receiver. I don't think this team really does. They just have a lot of solid receivers that can play, a lot of the game. Tight end, they have Darren Waller. Darren Waller was one of the better tight ends in the NFL last year, if I'm going to be honest. He's extremely underrated, really, really good player. And they signed Jason Witten, I believe it was this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see Jason Witten not playing for Dallas, but I don't think he's going to be great. He's getting older, but he could maybe make an impact for the Raiders this year. Offensive line is pretty good. Rodney Hudson at center, Richie Incognito at left guard. Colton Miller was taken in the first round a few years ago at left tackle. Gabe Jackson at right guard. And they have Trent Brown at right tackle. So it's a pretty good offensive line overall. Looking on the defense, last year they drafted Clelin Ferrell. He was okay as a rookie, didn't really do much. I think he could get better this season because, I think it was a bit of a reach. I believe the Raiders picked him very early. I could be wrong, but I think it was a bit of a reach of a pick. He hasn't really lived up to the hype yet, but I think he definitely can. And then they have Max Crosby as well. But I believe Max Crosby might not play. But I think I saw something that said he wasn't playing. I don't remember why, but Max Crosby may not play, which would be a big loss because he was really good as a rookie last year. But they also have Arden Key backing him up, who isn't great, but he can definitely play that position. Defensive tackle, they have Maurice Hurst and Malik Collins, both solid defensive tackles. Nothing special, but definitely not anything bad. Linebacking group, they have Nick Kwiatkowski from the Chicago Bears, Corey Littleton from the LA Rams, that was a fantastic signing, and Nicholas Morrow. Pretty good linebacking group. Corey Littleton, definitely the best player there. Looking at cornerbacks, they have Trayvon Mullen and Isaiah Johnson. Johnson isn't the best player, but Mullen can be very good. He was taken in the 2nd round of last year's draft. He can definitely be a good player. Safeties, they have Jonathan Abraham and Demarius Randall. Randall was pretty good in his career when he played with Cleveland. And Jonathan Abraham can be a pretty good player as well. He was taken in the 1st round of last year's draft. I think he could be pretty good this year, better than some people might expect. I think this is a pretty good Raiders team. Originally, I had them bottom of this division, but thinking about it again, they were so good last year, nearly made the playoffs. And I think they can take that next step with 7 teams this season and potentially make the playoffs. So I have the Las Vegas Raiders finishing 9-7, 3rd in the AFC West. Next up, coming in at number 2, you can probably guess who it is. Coming in at number 2, I have the Denver Broncos with a 10-6 record. I really like the Broncos this year as a team. I was really impressed with Drew Lock when he played last year, played a bit at the end of the season. I was so impressed with him as a player. He only really had one bad game. That was against the Kansas City Chiefs, but other than that, he was just a really, really good player, and I think this team got a lot better this offseason as well. They had a good draft. They made some good free agency signings. There was one thing that wasn't as good, which I'll talk about in a second, but for the most part, it was a very good offseason for the Denver Broncos. Quarterback, of course, they have Drew Lock, 2nd-year player. Last year, I believe he was taken with the 43rd pick in the NFL draft by the Broncos, of course, and last year didn't play much until later in the season when Joe Flacco got injured. He came in, I believe he played 5 games. I think he won 4 of them, lost 1. He was extremely impressive for the most part, especially a game against the Texans, a playoff team. He absolutely destroyed the Texans. He was really good when he played last year, and I think he's just going to improve this year with a better group around him. Running backs is fantastic. Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. Gordon, a lot of people don't really like him as a player. I think he's fine. I definitely think there are better running backs in the NFL, but I still think he's a really, really good player. And Phillip Lindsay, I think Phillip Lindsay is a fantastic player. I've liked him since he came into the league. I'm a big fan of him. Definitely one of my favorite players in the NFL. Just a great player overall, and he should be a big help for the Denver Broncos this year. Wide receiving group, they have Courtland Sutton, and they drafted both Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. All those guys are fantastic players in my opinion. Obviously, we haven't seen Jerry Jeudy or KJ Hamler play at the NFL level, and Courtland Sutton is relatively new to the NFL, but Jerry Jeudy was one of the best receivers in this year's draft class. I think he was second behind only CeeDee Lamb. Courtland Sutton's a great player. He has been for the past few years. And KJ Hamler was a pretty good receiver as well for Penn State. So I think that was a really good pick. And then they have a few other guys that can, play wide receiver. Deshaun Hamilton, Deontay Spencer. It's a pretty good receiving group overall. Definitely got better this offseason. Tight ends, they have Noah Fant and Albert Okwuegbunam, who they drafted this year. Both those guys are really good players. Fant was taken in the first round of last year's draft. He could be better this season, but I still think he could be better than he was last year, but I still think he was okay in his first season. I think he'll get even better this year. Offensive line is not great. They have Garrett Bowles, who hasn't really been great recently. They drafted Lloyd Cushenberry in the third round. Graham Glasgow and DeMar Dawson both are new to the team, I believe. I think those were very good signings there. And then Dalton Risner as well in that offensive line. It's not the strongest offensive line. It's one of the weaker in the division, but it's still going to be good enough to get the job done. Then looking at their defense, defensive end, they have Shelby Harris and Jarrell Casey. Both those guys are really good. Getting Jarrell Casey was I believe they barely had, I think it was for a 7th-round pick that trade was. That was a fantastic trade. And at defensive tackle, they have Mike Purcell. Not the best. They drafted McTelvin Agim in the 3rd round of this year's draft to play that position as well. So he might see some playing time this year. They also have Bradley Chubb, who was injured for the majority of last season, but he is a really, really good player when he gets on the field. Taken in the 1st round of the 2018 NFL draft, and if he gets some playing time, he should be really, really good this season. Looking at the linebackers, they have Alexander Johnson, Todd Davis, and Von Miller. Von Miller obviously is one of the best defensive players in the NFL. He isn't as good anymore, but he's still a really, really good player. And Todd Davis, I think I like Todd Davis as a player as well. Definitely not a fantastic player, but I don't think he's that bad. Cornerbacks, they have Bryce Callahan and A.J. Bouye. A.J. Bouye was really good. It was really good that they were able to get him from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Bryce Callahan can be a good player. Fortunately, they did lose Chris Harris Jr. If they kept him, that would be fantastic. But you got to lose some players to make your team stronger, which I think they did this season, the Broncos. And at safety, they have Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons. Simmons is such an underrated player. He's a really, really good safety. And Kareem Jackson can play on a high level as well. I think this Broncos team is really, really good and should be a playoff team this year. And I'm finishing second in the AFC West with a record of 10-6. And coming in at number 1, you probably already know who it is. You probably knew who it was before you even clicked on this video. But it's the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions. The Kansas City Chiefs are a top 3 team in the NFL, maybe even better than that. They are just such a good team, and they got arguably better this offseason. They didn't really make many offseason moves. They didn't sign too many players, but their draft was really good, in my opinion. They're just such a good team overall, and I have them coming in with a record of 12-4, which may not seem great, but the reason for that is they have a few tough road games, which I think they'll lose, but they should definitely still be a contender for the Super Bowl, and I would not be surprised to see them in the Super Bowl again this year. Quarterback, they have Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, to be honest, and he's only been a starter for 2 years. He's just such a good player. NFL MVP winner, NFL Super Bowl winner in 2 years as a starter. Not many players can say that. So Patrick Mahomes is just an incredible player, and he's going to have another incredible season. At running back, they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This was one of the best draft picks of the first round because I think Edwards-Helaire is a fantastic player. They were able to get him late in the first round. He's going to fit so well into the scheme. He's a receiving back kind of, but he's quick, doesn't have great stamina, but he's just a great player and should fit perfectly into this Chiefs scheme. At wide receiver, they have Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a fantastic player, one of the fastest receivers in the NFL. He's a fantastic deep threat, and Sammy Watkins is fast as well. He can definitely make some big plays, and then backing him up, they have Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson. Both those guys can be really good as well. So, great receiving group. Tight end, they have Travis Kelce. Depending on who you ask, he is the best tight end in the NFL. Some people may say it's George Kittle. Some people may even say it's Zach Ertz. For me, it's really between Kelce and Kittle to be the best tight end in the NFL. I don't really think that one is better than the other. I both think they're fantastic, but Travis Kelce is just an incredible tight end. Offensive line, they drafted Eric Fisher with the first pick in the NFL draft in 2013. He's just been average. He definitely hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been great in his career so far. They have Austin Ritter, who came from Cleveland recently, Kelce Osmele, and Michelle Swartz, who is the right tackle. Arguably the best right tackle in football. So pretty good offensive line. It definitely could be better in my opinion, but it's definitely not bad at all. Defense is probably the weak point of this team, but it's still incredibly strong. At defensive end, they have Frank Clark and Alex Okafor. Okafor isn't great, but Frank Clark can definitely play on a very high level. Defensive tackle, they have Chris Jones and Derek Nandi. Nandi hasn't played great in his career so far, but Chris Jones has. Jones is a really good player. Definitely one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, and should potentially get double-digit sacks this year. Linebacking group, they have Anthony Hitchens and Damian Wilson. Linebackers aren't great. They're not bad, but I do think it could be better, but still, it's a pretty good linebacking group. Cornerbacks, they have Charvarius Ward, Antonio Hamilton, and Rashad Fenton. It isn't the best cornerback group, I'm going to be honest, but I don't think it's bad. But it definitely could be better. It's probably the weak point on this team. And then safeties are fantastic. Juan Thornhill and Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu is one of the best safeties in the NFL. And Juan Thornhill can play on a high level. He was good at times. They also have Daniel Sorensen backing him up. But Tyrann Mathieu, without Tyrann Mathieu, the Chiefs would still be a good team without Tyrann Mathieu, but he helps this team out so much. He's a fantastic player. This team is just incredible. And they're going to make another run for the playoff, or for the Super Bowl, to be honest, again this season. It's unfortunate that only one team gets the first round bye this year, because otherwise I definitely think they would be one of those teams with the first round bye. I'll have to see what seed they are in my playoff prediction video in a few days, but they're an incredible team. I'm finishing 12-4, which of course is the best in the AFC West. So those were my predictions for the AFC West this season. If you guys did enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new around here, please subscribe. That would really help me out, and I would really appreciate it. I have a lot of content on the way because the NFL and college football is about to start. College football already has started, but certain days I'm even going to upload multiple times. So be ready. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.